Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Esteves, Executive Director of the Lenny Zachem Fund. And today we're doing a session on board recruitment and development. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And hopefully you all have questions that hopefully I can answer. And also, hopefully you have ideas that you'd like to share with your peers. So what we'll do is just jump right into it. And then what I've essentially done, I have some slides. We'll be sure to share the slides, but also have incorporated a break so we can ask you a couple of questions. We're just going to use the reactions features to do that. So we'll get right into it. So board recruitment, what we'll cover, why it's important, the preparation needed, recruitment strategy needed, local channels, why do people join boards, the 4 C's, the needs assessment, orientation process, and best practices. So, preparation. So, I'm sure all of you have a mission, right? And your mission, hopefully it's clear, it's concise. It's not a 3-paragraph mission. Maybe your values and your vision is a little longer, but your mission is straightforward. So this is a part of the preparation because people want to know what they're signing up for. So for one, if you're seeking to recruit someone to join your board, you want to be sure that they want to be sure that it makes sense and it's aligned with what they want to do. But another part of preparation for recruiting board members is assessing your own image. So what's your organizational reputation according to the community, according to past board members and staff? And sorry, I didn't realize I'm not sharing my screen, so you can't actually even see this. So that's much better. So hopefully everyone can see this now. All right, so again, assessing your image. What's the reputation? What's the public perception of your organization? Is it aligned with what it's supposed to be? Because that perception is what attracts people. People want to know that their contribution would also make a difference. But you also don't want to assume that the public knows what your organization is and what it does. So some of you have a very specific geographic focus. Does the broader community really understand and know who you are and what you're doing? And then is that consistent with the perception that you want to exist? And then this next step really is fix your image if necessary. So that reputation may not be aligned with what you want it to be. You may need to work on it before you start recruiting board members. And then lastly, it's about developing a message. So what are you seeking to accomplish? So this aligns directly to, and on one of the next slides, about a job description for board members. So just using the reactions feature, how many of you actually have a job description for board members? You can use the yes, no, or the thumbs up. Okay, a couple of folks. Ooh, a couple of sad faces. Okay. All right. So job description is important. So, and we'll get to that, definitely. So in terms of recruitment strategy, there's the why, there's the who, and there's the how. So the why, what are your organization's long-term goals? What are the skills you need to achieve those goals? So those 2 questions that need to be asked and answered separately, but they are directly related. So can anyone share a short goal for your board recruitment efforts? Any volunteers? What is a key thing that you're hoping to accomplish by recruiting a new board member? Linda?
Skill assets.
Skill and assets, all right? All right. So the next question is the who. Who are your ambassadors? So it's not who you're recruiting, it's who are your ambassadors? Who are the people who are going to help you recruit these new board members? Someone else put diversify in the chat. So skill assets, diversify your board, make it more representative of the community or the client population being served. And then your ambassadors could be a number of different people. They could be existing volunteers. They can be existing members or clients, or, depending on what you're doing, the people from whatever group that's being served, assisted in some way, or your donors. Maybe there are donors who are willing to be ambassadors to help you recruit board members. So there are a ton of other people beyond just yourselves who could be helpful to you in recruiting new folks to join. So now the how. When you think about recruitment channels, one thing you want to do is pay attention to your yield versus time. So when I say yield, is it leading? Is it producing good leads? Are people biting? What have you done before that was successful? What have you done before that was not successful? And then kind of really balancing that with your time, because you may think that you have to do it all, but you don't. You have volunteers, you have members, you have donors, you have resources, you have these peers here who may be willing to assist you in recruiting new board members. Another channel is the opportunities for yourself to be involved and speak publicly. So whether it's on panels or public forums or community conversations, that's also a way not just to talk about your work, but also the organization. So that's one way to kind of insert what you're doing into a broader conversation. Local volunteer networks, and those exist, and I'll share some of those in the next slide. There's always social media, but ideally you have someone who's fluent with social media to help you promote that. There's always referrals and word of mouth. And then also printed materials. Some of you, I know even my organization had brochures. That's, we haven't seen people in a while to give them brochures, but that's certainly something. The printed materials and brochures is something that has been used in the past. So here's an example of some local recruitment channels. So you have folks like the Corporate Volunteer Council of Greater Boston. So very specifically around folks in the corporate sector who are looking to be more involved with nonprofits. You have the United Way, which they actually used to have something called volunteer something or board something. It was like a specifically designed program to connect people who are board prospects with actual nonprofits. There's also Boston Cares and Volunteer Match. There's opportunities for you to post, volunteer opportunities, but also board service opportunities. And then just thinking more broadly, you have houses of worship. We have churches and synagogues and mosques, and then also some of the folks in the Zachem Fund represent interfaith organizations. So there's several. There's the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. There's one in Worcester. There's one in Attleboro. There's one in Brockton. So it's a ton of organizations like that are made up of a collective of houses of worship. Then you have job listing sites. So you may post, opportunities on Idealist or LinkedIn. Those are also places you can post board opportunities. The professional and business association. So locally, so those include kind of the functional skills. So things like accountants or engineers, but then also the business associations, which are things like the chambers of commerce. So the Boston one is huge, but also, there's a Needham Chamber of Commerce. There are smaller ones as well, but also in some cities there are business district entities. So for example, in Boston, there's Boston Main Streets, and they have, I think, 20 plus Main Streets districts in different business hubs throughout the city. Many of the other cities and towns in the state have similar kind of smaller business district entities as well. Those can be targets. Then you have, some folks who are nonprofit matchmakers, or, there are a couple of things where you, can pay for a service to connect with board members. And then there's BoardNet USA, which was a free service. I'm not sure, I haven't used it in a while, so, but I know that's something that has existed. So this one was free, but there are other opportunities where if the nonprofit doesn't pay, maybe the person exploring board service pays. But there are a ton of kind of specialized organizations like that. So now, when you think about why people join boards, so I won't read this full list, but on the list, it includes things like they want to give back, they want to share their skills, they want to make new friends. The board joining a board could be an opportunity to just connect with a new network of folks. But also, these can be things that you're using as part of your messaging, because it may tap into why someone is interested in joining a board and why your board might be a good fit for them, right? If they, looking to be an advocate, maybe you're an organization that advocacy is a key part of what you do, or maybe you serve a population that is really central to that person's identity or that person's passion, right? Maybe they just want to set an example for their own children, right? And showing that volunteerism in that way. So there's, there's a ton of opportunities and reasons why people join boards, to learn a new skill, right? There may be someone who has certain skills, but they're joining your board to learn how to, make group decisions or learn how to read financials, right? You could frame it as an opportunity for them to do that. Or maybe they just want to act on a passion and donate their time. But definitely, these are some, just a few examples of how you can leverage why people want to join boards and frame it as why it would make sense for them to join your specific board. So next, the 4 C's of board recruitment. And please let me know if we are going too fast. And also feel free to let me know if there are any questions that you might have in the chat. All right, just checking, no? All right, so the 4 C's of board recruitment: culture, character, competence, and connections, all right? So culture, what are your core values? Are they clear? So just connecting to that mission, that vision, those values, are they clear? Because when you're recruiting someone, you want someone who, in this respect, is a fit for your culture, the organizational culture, the board culture. Are you a board that is, a working board? Do you want someone to be able to roll up their sleeves and get to work? Are you a board that's really about fundraising? Do you want someone to be able to come in and be able to contribute in that way? So basically being clear about what kind of culture you have, and then identifying folks who seem like they are a fit for that culture, and then really interviewing them and getting a sense for whether they would be a good fit. The other C, character. This means, it means a lot of things, but respect, trust, maturity, passion, integrity, right? So do they have the right temperament? What are the, how do they carry themselves in the world, in your community? How do they treat other board members? How do they treat your members or constituents or clients, right? How are they as a person already, and are they a good fit for your board in terms of their character? Competence means many things. It doesn't mean that they have to have a PhD or master's degree or even a high school degree, right? There's a variety of lived experiences, but competence is really about their ability to take in information, process information, debate with others, deliberate, make decisions. How well do they listen? What other areas of expertise do they bring to the table? So this is where you think about functional skills. Do we need someone who has done fundraising before? Do we need someone who's an entrepreneur who really understands financial statements, who can assist us in making sure our financials are strong? Do we need someone who has a marketing background, or social media skill set, right? So that's where competence comes into play. And then lastly, connections. Can they expand your circle of influence? So, and when I say circle of influence, that can mean many things. It's not just people with money. Maybe they're expanding you to those that you serve currently, right? Or maybe there's a population that you aren't serving that they have a connection to. Maybe they are connected to affluent people with wealth. Maybe they're connected to more corporate folks and you're looking to leverage that relationship. Or maybe they're just good at being an evangelist for your organization and can help you elevate the organization's profile. So there's a variety of ways in which people's connections and lived experiences can be a benefit to your organization. All right, so now this is where we talk about the needs assessment. So the needs assessment, and actually I'll show you a couple of examples, but how many of you, if you could use your reactions again, how many of you already do a needs assessment of your board? Any, okay, 1, 2, a cry. All right. So 4 thumbs up, 5 thumbs up, and a cry face, right? So this needs assessment, really it's a identification of the functional skills you have, but also it can be broader than that. So typically that's what it includes. So it's things like finance skills, an audit background, fundraising, human resources, marketing, but also it's demographics, right? Someone said earlier they're looking to diversify their board. Maybe on your needs assessment, you're identifying all of the different ways all the different ways you want to diversify your board, whether it's age, whether it's gender, whether it's race, ethnicity, LGBT, gender expression, sexual orientation. There's a variety of ways that you can diversify your board, but breaking it all out and then identifying where you stand currently, and then as you recruit new people, having them fill out essentially an application or form so you can identify what they would bring to the table in terms of their various identities and skill sets. And then it helps you narrow down who you need. So one thing about the needs assessment is really doing it, building it out for your current board. So maybe you have, the treasurer, you have one treasurer who's the finance person and no one else is really a finance person. And that treasurer has indicated in the next 2 years, they're going to have to step away from the board. So you're going to have a gap in skill sets and knowledge, and you want to bring maybe at least 2 new folks to the board with a finance or accounting background or just a understanding of financials, right? So that needs assessment allows you to get a sense for what you have so that you can identify what you need. So the next 3 pages, and hopefully it should be pretty large enough. So this is one example. So if you see, this is essentially like a matrix. It's a chart. On the first column on the left, it lists industry knowledge, knowledge of sector, understanding of legislation. Then it has technical skills. It has accounting, finance, legal, marketing, IT, public relations, risk management, human resources, senior management, leadership, strategy development. And then each of the columns, you can anonymize it or not, but it lists each individual. And then in each of those columns, you can either do a checkbox if they just, if they check the box. You could do a scoring system. There's many different ways that you can do it. Some people do kind of like a pie graph where, it's fully shaded in. If the person is like an expert, maybe they're intermediate. So you can give, it's shaded in halfway. So you get a sense for you have 2 people that are decent at finance, and then 1 person who is fully competent in kind of law and legal stuff, and then that's it. So it just gives a sense for each individual on your board that exists currently. And then, this is literally the concept of checking the box. Who checks what box in terms of skills, and then when you see all the check marks, all the empty squares are your gaps. So each row, if there's a row with no check marks, that's your gap. We don't have someone with HR experience, but we really need it to complement the staff or the executive director, or if we really need someone on the board with a legal background to help us with all of these agreements and contracts we've been signing lately, or this building purchase we're exploring, right? It helps you identify what you need, what you have, and what you need. This is another example, and they're called different things. I call it needs assessment. This one calls it a board recruitment matrix. Same concept, right? This one, same general idea. The left-hand side has the different items or fields, and then in the middle, you can list current board members. And then this one is a little more broader. So to what I mentioned earlier, it has attributes, gender, age, race, ethnicity. It even has geography, right? Underserved community. And actually this one applies to us. Even the Zachem Fund, we've been trying to be intentional about these attributes and geography, right? Our board is mostly concentrated in Greater Boston. So we've been trying to be intentional about how we thinking broader than just Greater Boston in our board composition. It has knowledge and expertise again, finance, legal, governance is on there. People who've been on boards before, or maybe you want people who haven't been on boards before. Facilities. There's a this row is mission related. So maybe there's someone from the community being served, that your organization serves. But then also, if you'll notice with this matrix, it actually also has core competencies. Are they visionary? Are they a strategic thinker versus instead of a tactical thinker? Are they accountable? Are they organized? Can they volunteer their time? Do they have the capacity? They may check all the boxes, but if they're swamped with work or family or school and can't really commit, they may not be a good fit. And that rhymed. And then lastly, here's another chart. It's organized a little differently. It has the candidates on the left-hand side, the check marks. Do they have the time? Do they bring racial diversity? Do they bring a different geographic reach? Do they have contacts to money? Are they assertive and or positive? And then are they connected or attached to your mission, right? So these are just 3 examples in different ways that you can approach thinking about board recruitment and assessing your needs, and then identifying the skills and the attributes you want to bring to the table. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions. And I'll wait to see if anyone takes themselves off of mute or drops a question in the chat. All right. Oh, Linda, no?
I don't have a question, but I think this is great. Even if you've been on the board or any board for a while, it's a nice remind.
Mm-hmm.
It reinvigorates one's intention and what they would like to see progress to another step, or whatever was missing is now a remind to have it inclusive.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for that. All right, so I'll go to the next slide. Essentially, it wraps it up. So some best practices when you think about board recruitment. You want to develop a description of the duties and expectations, right? And then you want to revise that and review it regularly. Excuse me. In the reactions, can you give me a thumbs up or not if you have a board manual or board handbook? All right, one. Uh-oh, another sad face. Another sad face, a cry face. All right, so only one board manual, okay? So that's something that we are actually actively doing right now. We have a board manual that we've updated. We try to update it every time we bring on new board members, or at least yearly, so that it has information like our, calendar of events, meeting schedule, list of other board members, all of the documents, the bylaws, articles of incorporation, all of the basics that you want to provide for a new board member to help orient them to your organization. And I'll get to orientation as well. Other best practices, engaging the whole board in identifying candidates, right? Don't just put it on your shoulders. You want the board to tap their resources, pull out their phones or black books and thumb through their contacts to identify people that may be good prospects for joining your board. You want to provide information to them, to those candidates ahead of time, right? Prior to the first time that they're meeting as a new board member, right? That's, and this is separate from orientation, providing information up front. You have this job description, share it with them up front. Explore a conversation over email or coffee. We've certainly interviewed people in the last year simply over Zoom and brought them on the board without having met in person. You want them to complete an application, right? We have an online form that we ask potential board members to fill out. It asks them why they want to join the board, what makes them a good fit, but also asks them to identify those attributes. How do they identify? What skill sets do they feel like they bring to the table? And we have it broken out by, different areas. You may have more candidates than you have seats. So maybe you want to interview all of them, right? We have a process where we have some committees. We have a grant making committee that's kind of an on-ramp for potential board members. We have someone who joined our grant making committee last year who enjoyed it and dove headfirst, and then joined the board this year and is now the co-chair of that committee. All right. So that's our success story. Another best practice, maybe there are references that you can check and follow up on as well. And then lastly, and most importantly, orientation, right? You want to help provide them with a clear understanding of what they're getting into before they get started. So I'll take a break there. And I will stop sharing. So what I wanted to do now is take an opportunity for you all. Let's see how many people we have. So it's a small group. So maybe we'll just do 2 groups of 5. And what basically the prompt is, what do you feel like you are doing well in terms of board recruitment? And what are the areas that you're still looking to work on? Okay. So really it's just an opportunity for you all to talk and connect. But essentially, we're going to send you to breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. And again, the prompt is, and I'll type the prompt in the chat so it broadcasts to each room. But what are the pieces of board recruitment that you feel you're doing well, and the pieces that you feel like you still are gaps for you? Okay. So we're going to do this for about 10 minutes and then I'll bring everyone back and then we'll go into board development. Any questions before I do that? Okay. Let's folks to their rooms. And you should get an invitation to join. All right.
Hey, just a few updates on my end. I just finished the report for CIC.
Okay. You emailed it?
I'll send it right now. I just didn't want to like email it to you during like mid monologue, so that would distract you. I'm also glitching really hard on my end. Like a lot, like everyone's black. None of the screens are showing anything. It's all white, and then a lot of the buttons are missing. It just has words that are overlapping each other. I don't know if I can go in and out without interrupting the recording. So I don't know what will happen if I.
Make me the host.
Yeah.
And then that.
Yeah, I can't even do that. I made you co-host at the beginning though. I don't know if that.
Yeah, you did. So let me see. Here, let me send this to them first.
Yeah.
Well, give me a second. I should be able to log in, so I can log. And then when I log in, it should allow me to take over. Just give me a quick second. Because I upgraded my Zoom earlier, so it might just need to be upgraded.
Okay.
Updated, yeah.
I'll check for updates as soon as I'm able to log off.
Give me a quick second. Just waiting on this to open.
Yeah, no rush.
Now I'm logged in as Office.
Okay. I'll leave now.
It should work. Because yeah, as co-host, it should let me remain as co-host, and then it should take over. But just make sure you don't hit end.
Yeah, I won't hit. The thing is, I can't even X out of this. I have to quit Zoom via Task Manager because the X button doesn't work.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
really, it's not going to exit you out either. Now that you're.
It should. You know, it shouldn't.
Okay. All right. Fingers crossed.
All right.
Or I guess that button doesn't work either. All right, great. Let's try this.
Yep, I'm the host now. Okay. You're back.
And everything is in working order.
All right, so I'm gonna bring them back.
Sounds good.
In about a minute. All right. Let's see. Hey, Andres,
Yes.
lost you?
Yeah, we lost me. I left when I left the small room. I ended up leaving the whole situation.
You left the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see, do we have everyone now? Yes. All right, so everyone looks like they're back. So if there is a volunteer from each group, I'd love to hear kind of maybe a quick share out or summary, either of the group or just your own comments.
So Eric, this is Rita from group 2, I think. And we had the two main concerns: how to develop our board, how to do find a fundraising volunteer / board member, and the social media expert board member.
Okay. So it was social media, fundraising. What was the first one?
The first one was how to develop our current board members.
Okay. All right. And team 2, group 2?
Let's see, how do I put? We found that some of the challenges is even if you're on the board and you recruit, you have, some board members that are there just to be on the board as a stepping stone for their own motives. And others are there who may be younger. Sometimes they find other board members that will be a better fit. I had the challenge of not finding anyone because most of the time they didn't have time. And being on the board, there is a time commitment. And what skills you can contribute to the board.
Mhm.
It's tough. I've been asked to be on other boards and I have had to decline because I can't split in more than 2 handfuls in
Yeah, you
different
can't.
directions.
Yeah, you don't know how to clone yourself yet, right? Andrew hasn't helped us figure that out yet. So yeah, there's only one Linda. 24 hours a day. Well, thank you all for
Yes.
sharing that. Yeah, I just wanted to mix up the molds a little bit so that you all can talk with each other about, about what you're seeing and experiencing. So now I will transition into the second part of this presentation. So I will share my screen once again. And yeah, so this next section, board development, all right? So I just list out all these different items, and I'll, elaborate on each of them. Some of them I'll go through a little quicker because I'm less expert at these. So, but if there are questions that come up and I can't answer them, then we will find an answer for you. Deal? All right, so board development. First and foremost, orientation, right? And orientation is very important. And some of you said you're doing orientation already, and some of you said, no, we don't do that yet. I think an orientation is critical because it really helps to level set expectations, clarify expectations. So with your orientation, things that you could cover include your board culture and governing rules. And those can be the things that are documented and even the things that are unspoken, right? Or implied, how your board operates, how decisions are made, right? What is the decision-making process? Are you a consensus board? Are you a vote? Are you a 51% voting majority board? Do you actually make motions and follow parliamentary procedure in your board or not, right? But also the overview can include things like, what are your programming? What sites do you have? Who are you serving? What's your budget? What are the financial details, right? These new board prospects may be completely unfamiliar, but just are interested because what you do resonates, but they don't really know the details, right? It's useful for them to know, more details. They don't necessarily have to know every inner workings of the organization, but they should know more details than the average person, right? And then also what the staff does, what their roles are, what are the accomplishments of the staff and the organization recently. You want to clarify expectations, the term limits, maximum terms, attendance. Right now on our board, we're asking folks to attend at least 75% of the meeting. So that's an expectation. There's an expectation to serve on at least one committee. So, are those things clarified up front? Is there a minimum contribution? So again, many different organizations have different rules, but a common phrase is, what's your give-get policy? Do you have a financial contribution that's expected of the board? And can it be combined with either those people giving themselves or getting funding from other sources, whether it's their friends, their networks, their employers, right? So that's the give-get. It's a combination of what they can contribute themselves and leverage from other people. Because one of the pieces of your board composition diversity is people of affluence and people who don't have wealth, but maybe just a part of the community that's being served, or the population where you're located, who may not be able to give at higher levels, but they still can contribute their experience, and maybe they give $5, right? Because that $5 means you still have the expectation of 100% board giving, but they're just giving at different levels. But that's something that's really key as you apply for other grants and funders and foundations, and even government funding, because a question that's often asked is 100% of your board contributing financially to your organization? It doesn't mean that they're contributing all $500 each. It's contributing something. And then lastly, in the orientation, it's about reviewing the job description of the board members, the handbook, the policies, and building that relationship early and upfront. And again, don't forget, if you have questions, to raise your hand or ask them. So, board culture. board culture is important to development because it really allows you to get a sense for how the board operates, how things get done. So when you're developing a board, you want to reinforce the notion of respect and also respecting their time as well, right? So when we say respect their time is how productive are your meetings? Have any of you ever sat in on a board meeting where it's dragged on, right? You feel like you're wasting your time, right? So to not feel like you're wasting your time, have productive conversations that are more strategic and focused, right? Sending the committee minutes and the reports in advance gives people the opportunity to read them in advance, prepare questions if anything comes up that is a red flag or things that you really need to discuss. But you want to, really build that muscle of being prepared as the staff and the board so that your board meetings are more productive. There's also something called the consent agenda, things that need to be voted on, but if they don't really require a discussion, they can just be, summarized as part of the consent agenda, voted on, and then you move on to the next topic that might be more meaty of a topic to discuss. Another thing with board culture, really determining what is the committee structure. So in your your bylaws may say one thing, but is that actually how things operate? And do the bylaws need to change to really reflect current realities? What's the expectation for committee service? Are the committees actually active and doing things, right? Do you have committees in name only or not? That also determines your board culture. Do people feel like they're contributing at a level that keeps them engaged? This note, ensuring board members have access to relevant information that they understand and need. So just being able to provide timely information or answers to their questions. What are you offering to board members? The benefit, there was a slide earlier about why people join boards for many different reasons. This could be another one, right? One of those reasons was learn new skills. So are you offering board members opportunities for growth, like trainings and networking, some of the things that you might find useful, your board members might find useful? Or for instance, maybe you're an immigrant refugee focused organization and there's some forum on immigration justice. Are you sharing that with your board as well, so that they can also be informed of current trends that are directly relevant to your organization? And then lastly, how are decisions made, right? Are there dominant voices on the board that take up all the space? Are there people who speak much more than others on the board? And are there people on the board who are always quiet and never say anything and never chime in? But they have opinions, right? So how is the board operating in a way and being facilitated in a way so that everyone's perspective is included and valued and heard? For this next slide, for those who've attended our sessions before, I borrowed many of these slides from our former board, well, she's still technically current board member, Miki Akimoto, who's done this session in the past. But board duties, there's really three main duties. There's a duty of care, duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. The duty of care, responsibility to put in the careful, thoughtful work of being on the board, taking the time to prepare for meetings, showing up, and being present. The duty of loyalty, responsibility to at all times put the interests of the organization before personal interests or interests of other organizations. And then the duty of obedience, responsibility to ensure the organization follows the relevant state and federal laws and that it follows its own policies and governing documents. So again, you are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So that means there are things when it comes to governance around compliance, around accountability, around administration, around confidentiality, around being strategic, and around oversight. And the oversight is financial, but also it's oversight of the executive director, or whatever the work phrase is. Maybe it's co-director or lead organizer. The board is really essentially supervising that main person or leader, who then in turn runs the rest of the organization. So it's the difference between oversight and management, right? That organizational leader is managing the organization. The board is overseeing that person and the organization. So other things, when you think of board governance, so accountability. So there's things around compliance and regulations. You're accountable to your stakeholders and donors. You're accountable for managing, financial transactions securely, retaining documents that you're supposed to, not retaining things that you're not supposed to, right? If there are transitions, what is the board doing to help the organization run more smoothly? Providing rules of the road when there is a moment of transition or crisis, right? So often there are things that you may not think matters until it's the only thing that matters. And, it's just really that contingency planning for those unforeseen events. So on the note of policies, so I'll go into the conflict of interest one a little bit more, but there are other things around policies, conflict of interest policy, the board director roles and responsibilities. Maybe there's a travel and expense policy in place, record retention and destruction policy, compensation policy. I'll actually touch on that a little later. An investment policy, a spending policy, right? How are you managing your funds? How are you managing the donations? What is the separation of duties in your finance and accounting? And how you, record gifts and process expenses, right? These are things that, ideally the board or one of the committee of the board should have a hand in determining. This slide has a lot of text on it, but really around conflict of interest. It really is about, is there something written? Is there some written documentation around defining conflict of interest as it relates to your organization? And then how those conflicts are resolved. Is there a process for people recusing themselves from certain decisions? So for instance, you all know we're the Zecum Fund and we give grants. Sometimes people have a direct relationship with an organization that may be seeking funding. So even, in the last week, I had, 2 people email me saying, I can't review this grant because, I serve on one of their committees, right? That's a direct conflict where, we're making a funding decision that's connected to them. So they essentially are removing themselves from the decision making process for that organization because it's a direct conflict. Some conflicts, can be reasonably foreseen, some can't, but basically the policy also should include kind of the what if, what will you do if a conflict arises that you haven't planned for, right? So this next slide identifies five major categories of risk. So categories include financial and other transactions between the organizations and certain persons. So those can include excess benefit transactions. Those can include conflicts of interest. If you're very familiar with the audit terms, I think they call it related persons, right? Another category, influencing elections, which is called electioneering. That's completely prohibited. But then the other category, lobbying, is permitted with certain restrictions. And I know for a fact, some of your organizations, I'm looking at you, Andres, maybe Yvette, a lot of your work is around also advocacy, right? So how are you steering clear of the state and federal restrictions around electioneering and lobbying, but still being, community organizers and doing public education around pending legislation or ballot initiatives and things like that. Another category is voter registration, which is generally permitted, but it must be nonpartisan, right? It can't be in favor of any one candidate or party. It has to be kind of more general purpose. And then lastly, another category of risk is investments. So there's an act called the Uniform Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act, right? So just to go into these a little bit, the excess benefit transactions, the key principle there is do not overpay for goods or services from disqualified persons, which would be anyone who during the 5 years preceding the transaction was in a position to exercise substantial influence over the affairs of the organizations. So, paying someone who, overpaying someone who was involved and connected to the organization kind of in a very deep way. Around decision making. Electioneering, right? It's an outright bar to any activities defined as influencing or intending to influence an election. And this has a lot more detail on it on this slide. But yeah, it's really around extreme caution if you're really advocating publicly around people choosing one choice over another in an election, right? There's a website, boulderadvocacy.org. That's a good resource on kind of navigating electioneering, which is distinct from lobbying. So in this slide, lobbying, you'll see there's two kind of descriptions: direct lobbying, which is communication with a legislator about specific legislation, taking a position. And then grassroots lobbying, which has the same aspects of taking a position, but also communicating to the general public about specific legislation that includes not just a bill that's already been introduced, but anything that's kind of still pending as a proposal, making a call to action. And public charities may engage in lobbying if it's no significant part of their activities or expenditures, right? And our state has specific requirements on top of federal kind of requirements around lobbying and registering. Most of you kind of don't have that issue. There are some nonprofits where they have staff members that have to register as lobbyists because a lot of their work is around kind of taking a position and making a call to action around specific issues or legislation. Voter registration, generally speaking, it can be done by public charities so long as it's done in a nonpartisan fashion. But there also are local laws. So, Boston's local voter registration laws and requirements may vary from in Lawrence, right? Which may vary from Randolph. So it's important to kind of pay attention to all the levels. Most of the cities and towns in our state, are pretty aligned to the states, the Secretary of State's regulations around voter registration, so they all feed into that system. But yeah, if your work involves voter registration, it's just something to pay attention to. Yep, there's two others, and really all this information is part of the information you want to make sure new board members are aware of, right? So this is a part of board development in ensuring your board is familiar with the risk. So these are the risks for your organization. Maybe some of these do not apply, but it's really about providing them with an overview so they have an understanding of the things that can trip up a board, a nonprofit organization. For when it applies in investments, there's certain rules around what organizations can and can't do with investments, but you should be making spending decisions based on prudent oversight, taking into account long-term purposes of the fund, organization, and economic conditions. So there's almost there's levels of risk that are allowable when making decisions around investments when it relates to a nonprofit. And then lastly, tipping. If an organization receives too large a grant from a private foundation or other individual source, it can tip the public charity into private foundation status, right? So a nonprofit that, gets, a huge grant from one source, and does that happen for 2 years in a row, that can potentially lead to issues for that organization, because they're less of a public charity, because that single source can be considered a private source, right? A single entity that's now tipping the organization into less of a public charity, into the private status. And NGO Source is a resource for learning more about tipping, but it's just another risk for organizations to be aware of, especially board members. So in terms of best practices for board development, one, have a strategic plan, right? Know what you already know who you are, but we're having it written down, those that vision, those values. Is there a clear plan for what the organization seeks to accomplish? That then allows those new board members to have a clear sense of what they're contributing to, what they're asking for when they are approaching their networks for funding or resources, right? Maybe you want to have a board development committee or governance committee, right? It can be tasked with orientation and recruitment and all the things that go into board governance. If you don't, maybe 100% board contribution policy is a good thing to enact and put in place. This is that give-get policy that I mentioned earlier. Another best practice, have an orientation, if you don't already, for new board members, and or create a board manual. You can start off small, but much of the material you already have. It's that strategic plan. It's the mission, vision, goals. It's a summary description of what your organization does. It's many of the things that you already put in grant applications that you're really just providing to your board members so that they have a clear sense of, a better sense of the organization. You want to ensure financial reporting is clear and meaningful to the board. You want to have policies, clearly defined policies in place. Conflict of interest is a big one, but many of those others apply. You want to make sure there's a regular schedule for reviewing your governing documents, whether it's yearly, every 2 years, right? At least there's some consistency so that it hasn't been 10 years and everything's out of date, and everything that's on paper, it is completely different than what you're doing. Regular board meeting schedule published well in advance, right? People have a sense of what to expect, and then they can plan their schedules accordingly. You want to document meetings with minutes and then make sure everyone has access to them, right? Because it's a record of what you are doing and deciding. But then also, at least, the audit process that I'm close to wrapping up right now, they ask for the meeting minutes because they want to ensure that the organization is being run in the way it should be. So, documenting meeting minutes is important. Compensation. If the leader of the organization is paid, there should be clear documentation of how compensation is decided, right? That also ties into the audit process. And then lastly, another good best practice is there a self-assessment of the board and how things are going as the board? So the board is, really, being introspective of itself to assess, is it doing things the way it should be doing? And then lastly, I'll leave you with this. So a couple of resources. And again, you all will have the access to these slides, but there's Board Source, Blue Avocado, Boulder Advocacy, the Mass Nonprofit Network, TSNE Mission Works, and the National Council of Nonprofits. So pretty much all of these entities offer trainings virtually. They offer tools and templates and sample documents. The National Council of Nonprofits, they offer tip sheets on things board members can expect or should look out for. They offer tip sheets on recruitment and seminars similar to what we've done today. So with that, I will stop sharing, and I will ask once again, are there any questions?
This was very thorough. Thank you so much.
No problem. And I missed it early on, so hopefully everyone got a chance to drop your name and organization in the chat. But yeah, I appreciate you all being here. I hope you found it useful and informative. And it doesn't seem like there are any questions. So if not, I will bid you adieu and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Eric.